What? What is this? A good piece of journalism at the Washington Post? Read on, please. This is from Hugh Hewitt. Okay, a good conservative contributing columnist. This says, the GOP governors are handling COVID-19 better than Democrats, but you'd never know it from the news. Well, we know that. This says, against the backdrop of countless news stories about COVID-19, the pandemic, much of the coverage from the elite media centers in New York and Washington can be boiled down to this scheme. Republicans and Orange Man bad, right? That's what this is. And Democrats fighting valiantly to turn the tide wherever they can, and they still hold power. We know this is false. Hugh Hewitt knows this is false. You know this is false. But this is pointing out that every single mainstream media source will show you the positive things of the Democrats and the negative of the Republicans, and he's actually writing this and it's being published just a couple days ago in the Washington Post. So I think it's worth highlighting. I think Hugh Hewitt is worth highlighting. Before we go any further, please like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And then let's move forward here. This says, headlines on the newspaper's website this past weekend focus on Florida. Quote, the coronavirus ravaged Florida as Ron DeSantis sidelined scientists and followed Trump. So in that one, you can see they're blaming Republican leadership, Ron DeSantis. They're vilifying him, saying he sidelined scientists, and he's following Trump. Ooh, big bad orange man bad. The imperiled Republicans in the Senate, quote, as pandemic limits scrutiny, GOP fears lesser-known Democratic candidates will steamroll to a Senate majority. I think that's written weird. To senator majority, to a Senate majority, unquote. Florida became the state with the second highest number of cases over the weekend, surpassing New York. So if you're testing more people in Florida than you are in New York, which I don't know is true, but if you were, then wouldn't you expect naturally more cases to be there? I'm surprised to hear that Florida has more cases because New York was the epicenter of the virus for so long. Now it's become Florida. And I wonder if testing has something to do with that, or if it is a simple fact that more people are dying in New York. Maybe this will say, the awful metrics of COVID-19 deaths tell a different story. According to data kept current by Johns Hopkins University, New York has suffered 32,500 deaths. New Jersey's nearly 16,000. California's 8,500. Illinois is almost 8,000. Pennsylvania 7,000, Michigan 6,500. Okay, all of these states have Democratic governors. Well, yeah, we're suffering. I'm in Michigan and we are friggin' suffering. Republicans hold state houses in some big states. And there the counts look like this. Florida has seen 6,000 deaths, Texas 5, Ohio 3.3 thousand. Arizona also, with a GOP governor, has 3,300 dead. Thus, of the 10 states with the most fatalities, the 6 highest are all states with Democratic leadership. Republicans run the virus response in states ranked 7th through the 10th in the grim lineup. So all that's saying is 7 through 10 are GOP states. The others are all Democratic states. Not good. Not a good look if you're 1 through 6 and you're the Democrats. Michigan's in there. Michigan, New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, Pennsylvania. Not a good look if you're one of those governors. Okay. Hugh Hewitt goes on. Can you just imagine, though? I mean, imagine being an opinion writer for the Washington Post. I'm sure he contributes elsewhere. But imagine that you're writing for the Washington Post and you get away with pointing out the hypocrisy of the left and the mainstream media, which is the same. I mean, the DNC is what do they say? It's the MSDNC. I mean, that's the case. Fake news is obviously working hand in hand. They are the same with the DNC. And this is saying, how often have you seen those harsh facts? How often has actually anyone ever pointed out that the 6 worst states in the country are all run by Democrats, and then the next 4 are Republican? Well, no, they're going to point to those 4 and say, oh, these are the worst areas. Oh my gosh, look at Florida. Oh no, look at all these other places. Bullshit. How often has someone told you that? Instead, the headlines trumpet new cases, right? That's Florida. Oh, Florida's now the epicenter. Oh, gosh, how many more cases can we fake in Florida? How many counties are reporting 100% positivity, right? We saw that a couple weeks ago, so we know Florida's bullshit. Okay, Florida's 400,000 new cases. Bullshit. New York only has 400,000 cases. Oh, 400,012 to 432 in Florida. Well, that's bullshit also. Texas, almost 400,000. The case numbers follow population. Oh, go figure. Go figure. Hey, if you're Florida and you have a massive population and it's spring and people have been locked down and now it's summer and people are there and all of a sudden, yeah, I'll give you a test. I'll have a test. I'll have a test. I'll have a test there. And the doctors can just say all of those tests, positive, 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 positive. Life is about a nightmare because then they say quarantine yourself. We're going to count you as a number. And if you die anytime in the next year, we're going to count you as a COVID death. They may kill you just to get another number. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't put it past them. It says cable news networks follow their well-worn ruts toward predetermined storylines and familiar refrains. Familiar refrains. Some shows have embraced narratives that seem as repetitious as the top 40 radio stations of decades ago. That's definitely true. You can hear it almost in their voice. It's like, "Hi, I'm Casey Kasem, and you're listening to the top 40 negative anti-Trump records. Here we're gonna listen to the top 40 negative Trumpers. I'm Casey Kasem." That's probably not a very good Casey Kasem. I'm not going to cut it out, though. Coverage of the protests has become just as unbalanced. Go fucking figure. With protests raging in Portland for nearly 2 months, and Saturday night bringing violence in other cities such as Seattle and now Austin. Great. Oh, we're going to lose Texas. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. A great deal of attention has been trained on the president's completely legal deployment of federal officers to a few cities. A couple more coming. To protect public property, but not on who is creating the mayhem and who is firing the shots. The very popular Portland moms, we know it's all bullshit. I'm safe to say this is now a not safe for work video, and I'm swearing in it, so this is probably not going to be one you can play with the family, but here we go. Portland moms linking arms in their favorite photo. Far less is said or photographed on elite outlets about the shootings, arson, and lines of black-clad, that's all black bloc, anarchists. He's writing as if he agrees that they're anarchists. They're communists. They're anarchists until this government's overthrown. Then they're communists again. They're only flipping the anti-government switch because it's not the government they want. Interesting thing, and it's important to point out. My critique of the coverage says nothing about the epidemiology of the disease. I believe that the virus's relentless march has fought in good faith by every elected representative. Bullshit. Not fought in good faith at all. Those top 6 Democratic governors, they're top by a long shot. And they're top because all of them knew if you put old people with sick people, the old people will die. Period. I hate when people say period, but I just did it. Here we go. If you're the governor of New York and you say, all right, put a bunch of sick people not on the boat that Trump sent, not in the hospitals that are still totally able to take people, not in the pop-up set. Nope, just send them to the old folks care facilities. Send them to the elderly care facilities, and then watch as the sick people get sicker and die, and the old people then get sick and die. Well, go figure. So that's how you got 42% of those numbers in those states. That's a fact. New York City is just as crisscrossed and jam-packed subways. Florida and Arizona, California are car states. Montana, Utah are wide open and, in most places, lightly populated, whereas Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles are densely populated. The populations are older, concentrated, and impoverished. The toll has been higher. Go figure. It's almost like this disease, like many, wipe out the sick, the elderly, the invalids, so to speak. I mean, if you want to say that either someone is productive in a naturalist, humanist society, if we were all living in huts, who was productive and who's not? Well, if you're 500 pounds, you can't breathe, you're on your back, your feet are up, and you're taking oxygen, and you're being fed through a tube or a straw, you're probably, if you catch COVID, gonna die. Because in nature, you wouldn't live a day. I mean, people wouldn't put up with you. And that's kind of the thing. We're seeing COVID affect the people mostly. Now, I'm not going to say everyone, clearly. But for the most part, the people that are more prone to getting COVID, the people who have the comorbidities, naturally would not survive in the wild. So maybe that's what this is. I don't want to get too far off topic, but maybe he is saying that he thinks that the mayors and the governors all acted in good faith, and I don't buy that. So I'm allowed to speculate on other things. The population densities, they impact that, but I think that was known beforehand. It's not like the governors knew, hey, all these old folks' homes, why do they exist? Are there a bunch of young people in there? No, I didn't know they were old and sick. Well, what the hell? Who else lives there? Give me a break. This says the pandemic is not political. Okay, Hugh, I'm starting to take it back. It isn't a Republican or Democratic disease. It's a Chinese disease. Chinese are basically, they're communists, and if the Chinese communists create a virus with our CIA, which is really just operational democratic intelligence at this point, it should be the DIA, unfortunately. Reopening of states led to spread. Okay, I can go with that. If the mass demonstrations around Memorial Day did not contribute to the spread, it's hard for me to imagine that they reduced it. Well, here, Hugh, let me tell you how they did. They absolutely did. If you are outside, out and about on Memorial Day or on the weekend of, you're out in the sun, you're building vitamin D, you're out breathing fresh air, you may or may not be wearing a mask. I think some people did, and I think a lot of people kept their distance. But even if you didn't, you're out in the sun, you're absorbing every single vitamin that you need that's natural. You're out breathing good fresh air, you're out moving your body, your immune system is now kind of getting a little bit of energy, it's getting a little bit of revitalization. Something it hasn't seen if you're just sitting on your duff on the couch playing video games and eating Cheetos. A lot of people were doing that all lockdown. Trump hoped that the summer's heat would rout the virus. I don't know what that word is. Would rout the virus, and it has obviously not occurred. Few have the right calls here. Life generally cannot contain an invisible virus spread by asymptomatic carriers, and that's where it is, right? If people say, "Hey, we have asymptomatic transmission," a bunch of people who don't know they have it, show no symptoms clearly. By definition, they don't feel that they have it. They don't even feel sick. I could have it right now if I'm asymptomatic COVID positive, right? By their standard. But do you believe that is the case still? If I had it in March and I was asymptomatic, do I still have it and I'm asymptomatic? Could I be a constant spreader forever? Well, no, clearly not, right? Because they said if you quarantine for 14 days, that means if you got it, it will show itself. Or if you were asymptomatic, it will have died off, right? I don't know. Maybe you have it over those 14 days, you develop it, you get it really, really bad, but you're still asymptomatic. But you're like this crazy covered in COVID carrier, and anyone you come in contact with immediately gets it? Doubt it. When most of the tests are shown to be either not really all positive like they're being reported, or in many cases are being falsely given positives. We see many tests where nurses now, are taking videos in the hospitals, and they have been for months, but it's happening more and more frequently. They're just taking photos of, here's the test result where it says negative, but then it says presumed COVID. That's a number that goes to the CDC, and then the CDC reports it. Why do you think the White House demands that now all numbers come straight to the White House in addition to going to the CDC? Do you think it's so that they can't fake any more numbers? Do you think that they can do their own investigation and have an actuary sit down and say, there's serious fraud happening here because there's no way that we can have these differentiations in percentages. In some counties, you'll have none, and in others, right next to it, where they have a lot of overlapping facilities, you have, boom, this massive number. And then you see, well, there's a lot of interesting fraud going on. A lot of hospitals saying, well, if we claim that person was COVID, we get $7,000. Whereas if we had this person die and they didn't have COVID, it's only like $3,200. We're a hospital that makes money on doing procedures that aren't to do with COVID. And if we can't do those right now, we're going to call everyone COVID that we can. That's what's happening with hospitals across the board. And they're allowing it, and the Democrats are being served by it and are serving it. That greed at the hospital requires the Democrats feed them patients. So they are. And at the same time, the Democrats can then say, hey, look, more and more people are dying of COVID. Win-win. Orange man bad. This video good. Hit like. Leave a comment. Share it with your friends. And do everything else that you can to keep America afloat.